one of the things that we talked about in the first podcast was symptoms of mold toxicity. Let's just rehash that for people. And then maybe we can go into, we can continue down this rabbit hole and think, what can you do to detox from mold when you've been exposed?
Yeah, so this is just a presentation I did for Great Plains. I do practitioner training there, so I teach doctors and naturopaths and other people, practitioners, how to integrate treating mold in their practice. And this was a talk I gave for them. And this is not all-inclusive, but this is a big list here. And so if people are on audio, I don't want to read the whole thing off, but I'll just hit the big ones, which I see, which is fatigue. Dr. Brewer had a chronic fatigue clinic. 93 or 96% of his chronic fatigue patients had mycotoxins in the urine. So fatigue is directly linked in, chemical sensitivity. We talked about that. Blurry vision is a big one. So these are the people that turn 40 and they say, you know what, when I hit 40, my vision started changing. Is that due to the aging eye? Partially, but I also believe it's because they've accumulated so much mycotoxin. One of the ways you can test for mold if you don't have enough money is to do a visual contrast sensitivity test. It's called a VCS. And what happens is the blood flow to the eyes via the impairment of nitric oxide synthase. This is why erectile dysfunction happens too. If you don't have enough nitric oxide production, you don't have enough blood flow to the eyes, so you can't detect contrast well. So if you have vision issues and your eye doctor, like me, I went to the eye doctor. I need to post it on my Instagram. I had a photo of me with the big crazy thing at the eye doctor where they're flipping and doing this, and can you see this clearly and read the last line? I went to the eye doctor because my vision was so messed up, and he said, you've got 20/20. I'm like, how do I have 20/20? I can't freaking see. Like, my eyes are going blurry. It was mycotoxins. And so that's one of Shoemaker's things, is promoting people to do the VCS test.
You can find, I'll just interrupt you. I'm sorry. Yeah. You can find that at vcstest.com. Guys, it's a free test. I've done it on myself in the past. I haven't done it in a while. Maybe I should do another one. You can do it for free, and it's intense. It's very hard to see these things. I don't think I had anything major when I did it, but you can do that test for free. vcstest.com.
I failed hardcore. Yeah, I really failed it. So memory issues, shortness of breath, which is interesting because I have a slide right here. Let's see, on this thing going around and fungal diseases. And the crazy thing is there's a lot of people going to the emergency room right now with shortness of breath. And the doctors, this was a report here, they said that several reports of people with pulmonary aspergillosis. This means where you're literally growing mold in your lungs. You have this ball of mold in your lungs. They can't tell whether it's the virus or whether it's the mold colonization creating the shortness of breath. So what I'm telling people is if you test negative for the big C, but you have shortness of breath, it could be mold exposure. So that's interesting. Red eyes, light sensitivity, if all of a sudden, like if you're the type of person who has to wear sunglasses are bad for many reasons, but if you're the type of person who feels like you have to wear sunglasses all the time, consider mold toxicity. Lyme disease also does that because of some of the neuroinflammation, but mold has a lot of overlap. So a lot of these symptoms have overlap with Lyme. Many people with Lyme get worse by mold, or many people with mold get worse from Lyme. They kind of party together, I guess, is the way to say it, because Lyme chronically suppresses the immune system, and so does mold toxin. And so I think with me, with my history of being in the woods and having many tick bites, I think that's why mold took me down more, was because I had Lyme already from tick bites. What else should I show you on here? I've got a bunch of other crazy stuff. I mean, this was all about...
After the last talk, I think a lot of people wanted to know, okay, we've gone through it. If you're if you're not thriving, I've said this on my social media, if you're thriving, don't change anything about your diet. Don't do anything. You're great. If you're not thriving, think about what you're missing. Are you getting organs? Are you eating grains? Are you eating leaves? Are you eating stems? Are you eating roots of plants that have plant defense chemicals? That's the topic of a different podcast. Are you eating seed oils? What are you doing in your life if you're not thriving? If you're not thriving and you've turned over all the stones, are you exposed to mold? Do you have mold toxicity? Get a urine test, use Great Plains or whatever lab you want. Know what urine know what mold toxins come up on the urine, where you're getting those from. Are you getting them from grains? Are you getting them from wine? Are you getting them from coffee? Are you getting them from moldy grapes? Are you getting them from your environment? Do an ERMI test in your house. Do Petri dishes in your house. What's next, Evan? Say somebody's remediated, they've cleaned up their house. How can people begin to go forward from there with mold?
So binders, I mean, I think binders for life. I mean, we're constantly being exposed to stuff. I mean, even the Whole Foods here in Louisville, Kentucky is extremely moldy. I can tell you specifically where the mold is. Unfortunately, I'm sensitized to it, so I can feel it. I can tell you this section of the store is more moldy than this section of the store. And if you kind of peel back some of those drink containers, I mean, you can see mold growing in these things because of the constant humidity. So long story short, you're constantly going to be exposed to this. And if you were to do a test, this was a case study here of a 3-year-old that was diagnosed with autism. He had levels of gliotoxin. You want less than 200. This child had 15,893 of gliotoxin. This comes from Aspergillus mold. Ochratoxin, you want less than 4. They changed the reference range since this, but he was at a 74. So if you test positive like this means genetically you have an issue that you can't detox it. Meaning when you go to that moldy Whole Foods, when you go to that moldy restaurant, when you go to that moldy hotel in Cabo for the week, and you come back feeling like crap, you need to know that you've filled up your bucket. Now, how you win against this is if your rate of detox is greater than your rate of exposure. So if Monday through Friday you're working in a clean office or at a clean home, and on the weekends you go out and you get these exposures, you should be able to make it, and you should be able to stay well. In certain people, they have to go on mold sabbaticals where they just live in a bubble and they try to just avoid these moldy places. For me, I just stay on a permanent sabbatical, meaning if I go into a moldy bookstore and I smell it or see it, I'm leaving. Because if I stay in there long enough, I may get depressed, I may get anxious, I may just feel dizzy, I may feel spacey. Now, most people are not that sensitive because they haven't been sick like that. But when you have a huge mold exposure, your bucket gets so full that there's actually a name for it. They call it TILT, tilt. It's like toxin-induced loss of tolerance. That's what it is. Toxin-induced loss of tolerance. This can happen with pesticide exposure and chemical exposure. People that work in agriculture who got a big, let's say they got hit in the face with a big amount of pesticide. Now small amounts of pesticide make them sick. This tilt phenomenon happens with mold. And so I personally stay on binders. I do a binder every night before bed, either activated charcoal or silica or pectin or fulvic acids. My wife, we just got her urine run, and fortunately, she's completely clear of mycotoxins. So we've completely cleared her out. It took us 2 years to do it, but we did it. Now, if you can totally get clean, maybe you don't need lifelong detox, but most people, except for you, you're killing it. You're in fresh air all the time in Costa Rica. So like you're exempt, but most people that are in closed buildings all the time, they're probably getting exposed. And if you test positive in the urine, you're not detoxing it well. You should continue on with something. All I'm saying is like a $10, $15 bottle of activated charcoal, 1 capsule a night. Like this is simple, cheap, and effective. And everyone can get well if they put this all together. Now, that doesn't mean the mitochondrial dysfunction, the depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, personality changes, mood changes, behavioral changes, tics, where children like flap their hands or they do their head in weird motions. Just detoxing may not fix all of that. There may be other repair work you need to do to the gut, to the brain chemistry, but just the detox alone, just simply removing the toxin, a lot of times is enough to let the brain and the body start healing.